Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to Mass Effect 3 Multiplayer N7 Academy Part 22. In this episode, we'll be covering the Human Vanguard, who I've got to say is one of the most difficult kits to play with in the game on the higher levels at Gold and Platinum, but she is very satisfying to play with. Using Biotic Charge in combination with Nova is absolutely a lot of fun. You just have to make sure that you use it the right time, and I'll show you, of course, how to do that once we get into the game. But first off, let's show you how I spec her with her powers. So like I said, we use Biotic Charge and Nova mostly, and you don't really necessarily have to include Shockwave in here. I just keep off the rank 6 on Alliance training here, and instead just to give myself a little bit more versatility, being able to use Shockwave as well when you have a group of mooks especially, or if you have another biotic on your team and you want to do a kind of long distance, biotic explosion, or, do something through a wall, then that's what Shockwave is really good for. But for the most part, what you're going to mainly be using is Biotic Charge and Nova. Biotic Charge, of course, to be able to restore your shields, and of course, this is also a great way to get a really good biotic explosion. Biotic Charge is a really strong biotic explosion, so what I do with that is, of course, rank it all the way up to 6. So for rank 4 here, I have force and damage over radius. Personally, instead of having 2 additional targets, I usually like to just focus on 1 at a time. So have that be as strong as possible when you're hitting that one enemy. So that's with rank 4. With rank 5, we have weapon synergy versus power synergy. This is really has to do with after you do a successful biotic charge, would you rather have a buff on your weapons or a buff on your powers? So personally, I think that it's more natural after you do a biotic charge to then use your weapon right after this. And of course, I'm going to be using the Rieger carbine as my primary weapon. So basically, after I biotic charge an enemy, most likely I'm going to finish him off with the Rieger carbine. So to me, having the weapon synergy, having that extra 25% weapon damage is a lot more useful to me than doing power synergy. So then for rank 6 here, we have your bonus power versus barrier. I personally would absolutely say go with barrier here because being able to increase your barriers by an additional 50%. Of course, by barriers, that's basically like your shield. You absolutely want to have that benefit of using your biotic charge. So not just does it work as a great offensive power, it also will restore your barriers, and that will help keep you alive. And it's a much bigger deal when you're playing on Platinum, because when you're going to be doing this close quarter combat stuff, which is really what the Human Vanguard is all about, obviously, using Biotic Charge and Nova along with a shotgun, you need to make sure that, if you screw up, if you are in a tight spot and you have a lot of enemies shooting at you, that you're going to be able to stay alive, and using your Biotic Charge, not only just offensively, but defensively to restore your barriers is absolutely essential. So then, like I said, of course, if you want to use Shockwave as well, I just use the first 3 powers of this. And then for Nova, of course, Nova is a very interesting power. Basically, you smash the ground right in front of you, and that does kind of a area of effect attack that anything that is around you will be hit by that attack. And of course, you can also detonate biotic explosions with Nova, and I didn't mention this with biotic charge, but you can also detonate with biotic charge. So with Nova, once again, this is also a close quarters type of thing. You want to be doing this when you're right up against an enemy to get the biggest damage on him. So with rank 4, we have force and damage versus radius. I personally like to go with radius. It wouldn't be bad if you went with force and damage, but I like radius with this just because, if you're not always right up next to the enemy, this just gives you that extra ability to be able to make sure you actually damage them. So you don't have to be necessarily right next to them if you have radius, because this will give you, of course, that extra 40% of area of effect damage. So that is something that I definitely suggest doing. And then we have with rank 5, we have power recharge versus half blast. Since I'm going to be using, I'll go back here just to show you this with my equipment. I'm going to be using the power efficiency module 3, which of course allows you to have your plus 30% power recharge bonus. Since I'm going to be using that with Nova, I am not going to be using the power recharge. So the power efficiency module will take care of that to make sure that I have enough recharge speed with my powers. So instead, I'm going to be using half blast, and what this does is it allows you to use Nova 2 times in a row by reducing its barrier consumption by 50%. Obviously, the cost of this is it also reduces the damage and force that your Nova attack does by 40%, but that's not really a big deal because if you're doing Nova right, you should be doing it along with doing either biotic explosions or fire explosions. I'm going to be using incendiary ammo along with my Rieger carbine. So, I'm going to be priming everything for fire explosions, then detonating it with Nova or biotic charge or shockwave. So that's really what my aim is going to be. And of course, if you're playing on a team with someone else who is doing any priming for you, then of course you can work off of them. But in case you're not, and of course, in this video, obviously I'm going to be playing by myself. So I'm going to be doing, tons of fire explosions. And, that's really what you want to be using Nova for. You want to be using it as a detonator. And of course, since you can do it 2 times in a row with half blast, you can just be detonating left and right. And obviously this works the best when you're working on a biotic team, where everyone is a biotic and everyone's just constantly spamming out powers to prime and detonate. So especially on a close quarters map, which is really where I recommend playing with the Human Vanguard. If you're not doing random and you know what map you're going to be on, that's when you want to play with the Human Vanguard. Human Vanguard is not really something you want to play on a big map, because you're going to have to stay behind a lot, and you're going to have to wait for enemies to come up to you. While in a close quarters map, obviously that won't be the problem. So Human Vanguard, like I said earlier, it's kind of a tricky kit to get good with. It's very situational, and it takes a lot of practice to be able to get good with it on gold and platinum to be able to stay alive. So it's a balance of being able to know when to use your powers at the right time, as I'll demonstrate that once we get into the game. And lastly here we have Pierce versus Sustain. So I would definitely say go with Pierce in this. You just really want to increase the damage that you're going to do when you use the attack. In my opinion, a 25% chance of not using up barriers. If it was higher, but I don't really see a point in that. To me, having the damage is definitely much more useful. All right, and then Alliance Training. Of course, this is just for getting buffs on either your powers or your weapons. Since this is going to be a very power-based kit, I definitely suggest going with damage and capacity in this. Although you couldn't go wrong with weapon damage. I mean, this is always with Alliance Training. This is always either way. But for this, I think that this extra weight capacity bonus will definitely help with your cooldown speed for your powers. So I think that's the way to go here. And of course, it depends on what your weapons are. If you don't have strong weapons, then you probably will want to do this instead. But I'll be using a fully upgraded Rieger carbine, also with fully upgraded damage mod on it. So I don't really need any more weapon damage. So this is also another weapon damage versus power damage. I'm going to also go with power damage on this. I don't really need any more in headshot damage. All right, and then lastly here we have fitness. So this is of course just for your health and shields, or your melee damage. I'm not going to be using melee all that much. It's not really all that important with this kit. So I'm definitely going to go with the durability here. You want your health and shields, and also with shield recharge over martial artist, which is just more melee damage. And once again, also a fitness expert. We just want more health and shields just to keep you as your health and shields as strong as possible to help keep you alive, since you're going to be doing a lot of dangerous close quarters combat. And that's over melee synergy, which is just, of course, more melee damage. Okay, moving on to your weapons here. As I use in a lot of my kits, I go with the Rieger Carbine as well as the Acolyte for your sidearm. For your Rieger Carbine, I suggest using the Shotgun High Velocity Barrel, and of course that will just help to give you more of a buff to be able to increase your damage, as well as be able to shoot objects through shoot enemies through thick objects. And I just want to mention, of course, that the increased weapon weight by 50 points. While this does show up on your power recharge speed here when you're actually in the game, that it actually does not affect the weapon. That's actually a bug. So if you want to take advantage of that, go ahead and use the Shotgun High Velocity Barrel anyway. And I also suggest going with the spare thermal clip. I tend to run through the Rieger Carbine's ammo pretty quickly, so that helps. That helps with that. And then, of course, with the Acolyte, I suggest going with the ultralight materials. That will just help with the weapon weight, keep your cooldown speed faster. And you can also just throw on the high caliber barrel just for some extra damage on your Acolyte. And I just want to mention, of course, this is like I said, a very close quarters combat based kit. So having the Acolyte as your sidearm will help you to be able to do damage from afar. Especially on bigger maps, you're going to have to wait for enemies to be able to come up to you so that you can hit them at close quarters. You're not going to really want to if you want to be daring, you can go out there and do like a biotic charge and do whatever you have to do to stay alive. But for the most part, if you're going to be staying with your team, you're probably going to be behind cover. And but having the Acolyte there, that will be able to allow you to still be able to do damage even when the enemies are at a distance, and you can help strip their shields and everything, and also prime them for fire explosions. All right, moving on to equipment here. As I mentioned earlier, I'm using the Incendiary Rounds 4, and that is really the best way to go with this, in my opinion, especially if you're not going to be playing on a biotic team. So you're going to have to be doing all your priming and detonating yourself. If you're going to be on a biotic team, then it doesn't matter as much. You could probably go with warp rounds instead if you want to save your incendiary rounds. But of course, using your incendiary rounds will allow you to do, I would say, also to do the most damage to enemies with your Rieger, but also, of course, to prime for fire explosions. And then for your weapon bonus here, if you're using the Rieger Carbine as well, I definitely suggest going with Targeting VI, and that will just give you a boost to your headshot damage, which is pretty easy to do with the Rieger since you're close quarters with it. If you don't have that, you could also go with your Shotgun Rail Amp, or if you are also using a pistol like the Acolyte, you could go with your Pistol Rail Amp to boost that as well. And then for your armor bonus, as I mentioned, I'm going with the Power Efficiency module, and this will, of course, just allow me to have really fast cooldown speeds, which is great if you're using Biotic Charge, because you need that to stay alive. You really want to have access whenever you're playing to your with a Vanguard. You really want to have access to your Biotic Charge as quickly as possible, because you're just going to be doing that, and that's what's going to help keep you alive. If you would prefer not to use that, you could also definitely go with a Cyclonic Modulator. That will give you your shield bonus. You could also go with Adrenaline Mod 3, which will, of course, make your run speed a lot faster. Any of those will work just fine. But, of course, like I said, I'm going to go with Power Efficiency Module just to focus on making sure that I have my powers available to me as fast as possible. Lastly here, I'm going to go with the Berserker package, and of course this will just give me my boost to my shotgun damage and melee damage, since I'm using primarily the Rieger Carbine. You could also go with something like, let's see, the Shotgun Amp, or you could go with the Shield Booster, I would say. Either of those will work. Let's see if any of these other ones, I would say that those are the best. You could also, if you have something like structural ergonomics, that would also work with your power recharge speed. That's good too. But like I said, I would definitely suggest Shield Booster. You could also go with Omnicapacitors, although we'd be wasting the tech damage. commando package instead, that would also work. But really, I think that berserker package, that's what I like to use, just to, you know, further increase my shotgun damage there. All right, so that's gonna wrap up the build. So let's hop into a game.
A strategic area has been compromised. Hostile forces are advancing. Secure the area.
All right, so what I use for my keybinds here, for the biotic charge, I use middle mouse or 3, and then for shockwave, I use F, and then for Nova, I use X. All right, so like I said, this is going to be a very close quarters based kit. I'm going to be, you know, wanting to just keep everything pretty close to me so that I can either Nova it or use my Rieger. So there's Nova for you there. Once I get to some other enemies who are not just mooks, so of course I'll be able to demonstrate some fire explosions for you. Of course, well, there you go. There's a biotic charge for you. That was just priming with the Rieger with a fire explosion, then detonating with biotic charge. So my shield's down here, so of course just wanted to use biotic charge to restore my shields. And like I said, when you're at a distance, you can use your acolyte. There's another fire explosion there. So as you probably noticed, what Nova is also really good for is just crowd control in general. So if you have a bunch of enemies coming at you, you can just use them just to hit them away from you. Pretty straightforward.
Enemy is regrouping. Time to reload.
Once again, you're just using either your Rieger or your acolyte to do your priming for the fire explosion. Then you're going to use one of your 3 powers there to detonate it. And of course, like I said, if you want to do some detonations or just knock enemies away through a wall, that's really what your shockwave is for. Or obviously, if you just want to, you know, do some group damage. Alright, so here's a brute here, so of course I'm going to prime them. Then I can detonate with... Oh, it wasn't primed. There we go, now he's primed, so there's that fire explosion. There you go. That's biotic charge can definitely get you out of a jam. And also, if you're at a distance, there you go. You can also use shockwave for that. You don't want to get too close to that brute so you don't get sync killed. Like I said, it's a lot more fun when you're playing on a team, because you can just have your team be priming for you left and right, and you can just be detonating, especially on close quarters maps like Glacier or White. Those are really great maps for the Human Vanguard. Almost perfect. Alright, so let's just do this objective here, and then we'll wrap this up.
Fleet movement data is hidden here. Get on a terminal and start upload. You're in. Stay close to maintain connection.
So like I said earlier, this is really what your Acolyte's for. When you're at a distance here and you can't really move around, you can still do damage to enemies with your Acolyte.
Get in and get it done. Understood. Connection broken.
The hell is she? Oh god. Yeah, that was pretty simple. Oh, let's see if we can. There we go. Alright, so I should take care of her. Nope. Okay. Oh, there we go. Okay.
Stay alert.
Alright, so I think that wraps it up. Hopefully that was useful to you and explain everything. In the next video, I'll go over the Geth Soldier. So that's going to be very flamer based, so that should be pretty interesting. So thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you next time. capnbozzy out.